Hey guys, Top Khan here. We finally had some Mongols footage shown, so now I can talk about some of the gameplay tips based on what we saw in the show match. So at the start of the game, you start like this, with your town center packed up, 6 villagers, a sheep, and your Khan. As Mongols, you have a lot of stuff to do from second 0 in the game. The first thing you need to do is look around and try to find a spot like Mark R did here, where you can tuck the TC in between the gold and the trees. This won't always be possible, as a lot of the maps, because of the random map generation, the gold is not going to be close to the trees. So you should have a priority on most maps that should be something like this. It should be wood plus gold, better than wood plus hunt, better than wood plus stone, better than just wood. This is just my opinion on the priorities for the resources. It could be totally wrong, but that's what I think so far. Now, I'm not sure yet how much time you really want to spend looking, but I wouldn't delay the town center by more than like 20 seconds. Otherwise, you're just going to be way too behind in villagers. The reason wood is so high on the priority is because the next thing you do after finding your town center location is you need to build an ovu, which costs 150 wood. The ovu should be built with one of your 6 starting villagers, like Mark did here, and it's better the earlier it is, because it'll give you tons of stone to get the improved upgrades and extra units. My advice for finding the stone would be just look at the minimap and send one villager there with a right click on the minimap near the stone. Since you only start with 200 wood, and that costs 150, it means you won't have enough resources to build a gur. The gur is where you drop off resources, and it costs 100 wood as Mongols. You can see this because at 1 minute 10, he has 130 wood, and then he goes to build it and suddenly drops to 30. So it's absolutely critical that you have wood near your town center at the start, otherwise you'd have to do long distance chopping. Next, you need to send 5 villagers to a tree near where you plan to put down the town center, and begin chopping a tree down. The Khan also needs to use his signal arrow ability for a movement speed buff on the town center so that it gets to where it needs to unpack quicker. Then as soon as you've gathered a couple sheep onto your town center, move the villagers off the wood and back onto sheep. From here, the game can play out in a lot of different ways, and I can't really explain in depth until it's out, but basically that's your first 30 seconds of the game right there. And as you can see, as Mongols, there's a lot more to do than the other civs. Next, we'll have a look at the Khan. Based on the show match alone, the Khan is my favorite unit in the game. It is the most microable unit that we've seen so far, and has some insane abilities to change the tide of battles. The Khan appears to have stats of 90 HP and 2 damage in Dark Age, 115 HP and 4 damage in Feudal, 300 HP and 14 damage in Castle, and 450 HP and 26 damage in Imperial. It also regens HP like a scout. The Khan can also fire while moving, and seems to have a pretty good range, but sadly in these matches we never got to see the Khan's actual range. The Khan's signal arrow abilities will unlock at different ages, so let's discuss those. In the Dark Age, he gets a signal arrow that can be used to increase the movement speed, and it looks like probably of buildings too. You could use that arrow to catch up to an enemy scout, or to run away from a town center that's got arrows coming after you. But later in the game after Dark Age, it's also really strong for chasing a retreating enemy down, or escaping from a battle that you think you shouldn't take. It appears to stack with your Yam Speed aura, meaning you get a 0.5 per second movement speed increase, plus 15% on the Yam network, to make Mongols have the quickest units in the game. The Scout Hawk also appears in Dark Age. They mentioned that it allows you to keep vision of an area wherever you use it for 30 seconds. I'll show you the best usage that I can imagine for this in Paint here. Let's say that this is a tree line, and this is the enemy worker. Now I moved my archers, or I built an outpost here, and normally you can't see through the trees, but if the Khan runs around, then the Khan should be able to drop the scouting bird and give me vision, allowing my towers to hit over the wood line and deny their villagers from working safely for about 30 seconds. You could also use it if you just want to watch an area, of course, see where the movement of enemies are going, and I bet later we'll find even more uses for something like this. The attack speed buff is huge, as it does 50% attack speed bonus for 5 seconds, which will allow you to win fights that you shouldn't have. You can beat longbows with just regular archers with a 50% attack speed buff. Or you can allow for more damage to be done during a short window of harass on villagers. It's especially strong for range units because they don't have to move during the duration of the buff. Next we see that it has the armor buff, and while it was never used in the show match, they did mouse over it. It shows that it gives plus 3 armor. It doesn't say what types of armor. Maybe all types. If it gives siege armor, it would reduce damage from mangonels or nest of bees, not sure. If it gives pierce armor, it's really strong versus archers or towers. And if it affects your naval units too, then that would be a really big boost for defensive naval fights. It might even give fire armor, and that would make siege units more resistant to torches. We're gonna have to wait and see because they didn't actually use it in the show match, so not 100% sure on this one yet. So as I mentioned earlier, the Khan's damage in Dark Age is only 2, so it can't really do much, because it'll take 25 arrows to kill a villager. But in Feudal Age, the Khan does 4 damage, so 13 arrows to kill a villager should make it pretty annoying for an enemy to deal with. So I'd recommend as soon as Feudal Age starts, have your Khan near the enemy villagers to start harassing them. And if you get a villager low, use the attack speed flare to fire a little quicker, because they might not expect that. They might have thought they had time to pull back later, and then you use that and then pick it off. It takes 100 seconds for the Khan to respawn, it appears, but 100 seconds is a long time, so try to keep it alive, because as long as the thing is alive, It'll basically feel like you have a map hack, scouting their base and providing really annoying harass to the opponent. Let's look at the Mongols' buildings. Based on what we saw in the show match, most buildings the Mongols can build are able to move and relocate. Where I think you'll use this most often is with your resource gathering buildings, the Gur. Basically, you should never have a situation like this. Each of these buildings costs 100 wood, which is 50 more than other civilizations' resource drop-offs. So you want to use as few as possible and move them around to be close to resources. Even here like this Gur should have been moved closer. When a wood line is getting chopped, you don't need to build a new one or keep one far away, just move it. Same goes for if you built one on top of a hunt resource. As soon as the hunt resources are gone, move it. Another advantage of the Gur is that it has all the tech upgrades on it for economy, all in one place. So you can build it wherever you want and get any eco upgrade you want. The show match was a pretty poor example of how to use Gurs because he has like 10 of them scattered all over doing nothing, which is around 1,000 resources wasted of just wood. It's one of the biggest Mongol bonuses, and to see it wasted like this was a little sad for me. Next, let's talk a little bit about the Ovu. The Ovu that we saw in the show match, he gets 1 stone at 35 seconds. Then at 1 minute 35, we can see he has 105 stone. So it appears to be roughly 105 stone per minute income. We also see it depleted the 1500 stone resources at about 14 minutes and 53 seconds, so we should expect to have to replace an Ovu around this time every game. And like I mentioned earlier, the Ovu should be built ASAP, because the stone that it gives you will allow you to produce multiple units at a time as long as the buildings are close to the Ovu. If you do build production buildings, I like the way that Mark did it in this game, where he builds them near the villagers and then moves the buildings to the Ovu. I'd also recommend doing that, but you probably need to have a unit out if you're blind, and it's mainly because he didn't have any scouting going on. As long as the Khan was in an area to scout what was coming, then he wouldn't have got hit by this tower rush on top of the Ovu like it did happen. A big thing to remember as Mongols is you're not building houses. You can see from second 0 he's at 200 population max. Not having houses is basically your economic advantage, since you don't lose 15 seconds of villager time building houses constantly, and you don't need to spend wood on houses. It means you can use those extra resources to build a network of towers for vision. Just like the Zerg in StarCraft, you're not able to wall, so you need to have better movement and vision to react to the enemy and prepare counterattacks, or move units in position to cut off reinforcements. The deer stones provide the Yamura as well, and they provide it for free. It'll probably be very strong to move the deer stones up into the middle of the map somewhere for reinforcing your attacks. They also mentioned that the Castle Age landmark, the step here, it's basically a Gur. And look at the size of it, by the way. It has a massive surface area to be used for turning in resources, making it a lot better than a Gur. You should be able to throw tons of villagers on it. Start using a market around Castle Age because you're getting the bonus gold. You can rebalance your economy a lot like that. And you also need to make sure, if you are using this landmark, that your villagers are actually turning gold into the landmark. If you see in the show match, he has multiple villagers that are turning in gold to the town center, so he's not getting the bonus 50% income. They're basically working 50% slower. The 50% bonus gold that you get from dropping off here is basically generated out of thin air too. So if the deposit max on the gold is 4,000, then you're turning that into 6,000. 50% gold generated out of thin air at every gold deposit you drop this thing on, because you can move it afterwards too. The Pastures are basically farms for the Mongols, and it appears that Pastures have a rally button, so you can tell the sheep to go where you want them to as they pop out. I think it's important to build the Pastures in a way that they'll face the town center. It looks like you can change the way they face because he built 2 away from the town center and 1 that's kind of towards it. In the show match video, we see that the first sheep pops out at 15 minutes and 4 seconds, and then 2 minutes later at 17:04, that's the second sheep there. This means we get about 1 sheep per 2 minutes produced from a pasture. Since 1 sheep has 250 food on it, let's make the math easier. Divide that by 2 and we get 125 food per minute from the pasture. From spreadsheets that have been made, we can see 1 villager to gather 10 food from a sheep without any upgrades. It takes about 13 seconds. So 1 villager should be able to gather around 45 food per minute from a sheep. So around 2.7-ish villagers per pasture should be enough for them to not be idle while gathering. Unless my math has failed, I'm not a math guy. They never showed the cost of the pastures in the show match, but if you watch at 1240, it goes from 879 to 729, and then from 729 to 579. And if you look at the minimap, we see icons go up where the pastures appear to be later. So my guess is that pastures probably cost about 150 wood each, which is double the cost of a farm. But one of the biggest things for pastures will be in team games, because it looks like you'll probably be able to support giving your allies extra sheep, so they might not even have to build farms. Probably going to be really strong to have a Mongols player on your team. Let's talk a little bit about stone for the Mongols. The stone that you're banking as Mongols, it's very crucial. They mention the stone cost is equal to the total resource cost of the unit, or the upgrade that you're getting, but they also moused over the villagers, and we can see that for villagers it was 3 times the cost. So there's clearly some exceptions, and there might be more exceptions to that rule. But because of the villagers' cost being so high, I'd say that the incentive is probably to invest your stone into units in order to harass or defend easier, or even just get the better upgrades rather than the villagers. Also, in order for the town center to make use of the stone, it would have to be built on top of the Ovu, and many times the stone is in a really poor starting area for a town center, with no other resources nearby. The big advantage of stone is that you can use it to produce reactionarily, is that a word? A lot easier. Since I mentioned earlier the Khan is probably nearby the enemy base to see what's going on, you can see what they're doing and start pumping out units and double the production of whatever you need to counter them. We'll have to wait and see what upgrades are available with stone and how good they are. I can imagine them having a couple where it's like really strong to get them early, but for now we just don't know. I've already mentioned it a couple times, but the whole idea of Mongols just reminds me a lot of the Zerg. Your Khan, it feels like an overlord just granting you free vision. The stone, it's like extra larva to react to what they're doing to produce quicker. Outposts are acting as creep. StarCraft guys, I think you understood everything I just said. Finally, the raid bonuses. They showed that when you reduce the amount of HP a building has to 25%, it will trigger a raid bounty of 50 gold and 50 food. In the other video that they published, we also see that it gave 100 wood, 100 food, and 100 gold. So maybe there's an upgrade to make it better? This bonus makes being aggressive really play into your hands, because it'll also act as your economy. Units like horsemen or lancers will be huge in the early game to rush in and destroy houses, mills, mining camps, anything that the enemy built in a poor spot. Getting early castle age to get better siege units out and start destroying houses or farms is probably going to be nearly as strong as having another town center, because while pushing the enemy buildings down, you're reducing their bonuses while increasing your income. I'm not sure how it works if the enemy was to repair a building and then you set it on fire again, but it might be worth it to just like leave their buildings on fire and then hope they repair and then put it on fire again. I don't know if there's a cooldown on it, because if that's how it works, it's going to be really annoying for them to deal with. I can't wait to see more info about the raid bonus, but for now that's about as far as I can talk about it. I'd love to talk about the unique units and the unique techs and all the other unique bonuses the Mongols get, but sadly the show match didn't show very much of that. I've only talked about stuff that was able to be understood from the show match and from the Mongols video they posted, so for now that might be another video in the future to talk about that. Personally, I'm going to have Mongols as my go-to civ whenever I can, because I fell in love with their playstyle, based purely on the show match. So if you want to see someone who's going to play a lot of Mongols at launch, why not subscribe? Because I'm sure you'll see a lot of games from me in the future. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.